The canyon of blood and mercy. The wind was cruel that evening. It carried the smell of smoke, gunpowder, and death. The plains of Texas stretched endless, and in its silence lay the remains of a forgotten battle. Among the dead, one man still breathed. Takano, chief of the wolf band of the Comanche, had been shot twice, once in the shoulder, once in the ribs. His horse had fallen, and so had his pride. The soldiers had moved on, certain no one could live through that. He was left half buried in dust, the red canyon beneath him echoing the cries of crows. The sun beat down, and every breath was pain. He thought of his people, scattered, hungry, hunted. He thought of his wife, long gone. He thought this was how a warrior dies. But fate wasn't done with him. On the far side of that canyon, a small wooden farmhouse stood. There lived Abigail, a young woman of barely 18 summers, with eyes soft as dusk and a heart that refused to turn hard, no matter how cruel the land became. Her father, Thomas Hale, was a veteran settler, a man who had lost his wife to fever and his faith to war. He'd warned Abigail since childhood. If you ever see an Indian, you run. They ain't human like us. But Abigail wasn't made to hate. That evening, as the sun began to sink, she went to the canyon to fetch water from the lower spring. She heard a sound, faint, broken. A man's groan, buried under the wind. She froze. The stories her father told filled her head. Comanche raiders, scalpers, devils of the plains. Still, something in her heart pulled her closer. She crawled to the cliff's edge and looked down. There, lying among rocks and red dust, was a man, his skin bronze, his chest rising shallowly. Blood had dried across his ribs, and an arrowhead necklace gleamed against his throat. Her heart twisted. He was dying. She ran home, barefoot, dust kicking behind her. Pa, there's a man, hurt bad, down by the canyon. Thomas looked up from his hammering. A soldier. No, an Indian. He froze. His jaw tightened. Get inside, Abigail. Don't speak of it again. But Pa, he's alive. Alive now, dead by nightfall. It ain't our concern. Abigail's throat tightened. Mama would have helped him. Her father slammed the hammer down. Your mama's gone, and she ain't coming back, just 'cause you got a fool's heart. Tears filled Abigail's eyes. She turned and ran back toward the canyon. By the time she returned, the light was fading. Coyotes cried in the distance. She tied a rope to an old tree root, her hands trembling. I can't let you die, she whispered into the wind. She began to climb. Her palms tore on the rough stone. Twice she almost slipped, but she kept going, inch by inch, until she reached the bottom. The man was barely breathing. His lips moved faintly. Words she didn't understand. Shoo, she whispered. You're safe now. I'll help you. She tore a strip from her dress, pressed it against the wound, and gave him water from her flask. When his eyes flickered open, he saw her face, pale, framed by golden hair, haloed in dying sunlight. He thought she was a spirit. It took every bit of strength. She had to drag him to a hollow near the rocks, where the wind couldn't reach. She stayed with him through the night, feeding him sips of water, watching the stars flicker above. At dawn, his voice came rough but steady. You know, soldier? Abigail shook her head. Farmer's daughter. He winced in pain. You help enemy? Her lips trembled. I don't see an enemy. I see a man. He looked at her for a long moment, eyes dark and unreadable. Then he closed them again and whispered, Then you have heart of eagle. When morning broke, her father found the rope by the canyon. He followed it down, and his blood froze when he saw her sitting beside the wounded Comanche, eyes red from sleeplessness. Abigail, he barked. What have you done? Please, Pa, she said softly. He'll die if we leave him. That's the point. Thomas thundered. You dragging devils into my home now. But when he looked at her, saw the pleading in her eyes, the same look her mother once gave when nursing a wounded bird, something inside him broke. He sighed. Fine, but he stays in the barn, and if he so much as breathes wrong, I'll finish what them soldiers started. Abigail smiled faintly through tears. Thank you, Pa. They brought the chief to the barn and laid him on straw. Abigail tended his wounds each day, cleaned the gashes, changed the bandages. He spoke little, mostly in broken English. His name was Takano, the Sky Hawk. He told her he was once a leader, until men in blue coats brought fire to his village. At first, Thomas refused to go near him, but he saw the way his daughter worked, patient, gentle, fearless, and slowly. His anger began to fade into silence. Takano healed, but every time Abigail entered the barn, his heartbeat quickened. He'd watch her brush her hair aside, hum softly, feed him soup she made herself. He'd fought many battles, but never against a feeling like this. One evening, as rain fell and thunder rolled, Takano stirred in his cot. Abigail sat beside him, reading softly from her mother's old Bible. He spoke suddenly. "You believe in that book?" She looked up. "Yes. It teaches kindness." He smiled faintly. "My people believe same. Only our stories speak through wind, not paper." They sat quietly for a moment. Then he reached for her hand, gently, like touching light. Her breath caught. His skin was warm, scarred, real. "Why did you save me?" he asked. She hesitated. "Because I couldn't stand the thought of you dying alone." He looked at her, the girl who risked her life for a man her world called a savage, and whispered, "Then you saved more than my life." Outside, her father watched through the cracks of the barn wall. He saw his daughter smile, the same soft curve her mother once had, and he saw the warrior's gaze, not of hatred, but something deeper, truer. He turned away, heart heavy. He knew this peace couldn't last. Hearts beneath the prairie sky. The rains passed, and spring returned to the valley. The earth turned soft again, and the sound of life returned, the lowing of cattle, the call of crows, the rustle of wind through dry grass. Takano healed with each sunrise. He still limped when he walked, but his eyes had strength again, the deep, steady calm of a man who had seen death and lived to remember it. Abigail saw him every day, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just sitting quietly beside him. She noticed the way he listened to the wind before he spoke, as if waiting for the world to answer. And slowly, she realized she had come to depend on that silence on him. Her father noticed too. The warning. One evening, Thomas Hale walked to the barn, rifle slung low on his shoulder. He found Takano standing near the open door, watching the sunset. "You're healing fast," Thomas said. Takano nodded. "Your daughter, she has the hands of a healer." Thomas's jaw tightened. "She's young, kind-hearted. Don't mistake kindness for invitation." Takano looked at him, calm and unwavering. "I would not dishonor her. Or you." Thomas sighed. "You already have, just by staying alive." The Comanche turned his gaze back to the horizon. "If you want me gone, I will leave when the moon is full. But before that day, I will help with your land. It is dry. Your crops suffer." Thomas blinked, caught off guard. "You know something about farming?" Takano smiled faintly. "We call it listening to the earth." The days of work. And so he stayed. He rose early each morning, his tall frame casting long shadows over the fields. He showed Abigail how to plant deeper in the soil, where the ground stayed moist even in drought. He built irrigation trenches from the stream, teaching her how to direct water using the slope of the land. At first, Thomas kept his distance, but even he couldn't deny the change. The field began to bloom. Green crept across the brown earth like hope reborn. Abigail laughed again, chasing chickens barefoot, her golden hair glinting in the sun. And Takano, who once believed his heart had turned to stone, found himself smiling too. Each night, after supper, he sat on the porch beside her. She'd hum old hymns, and he'd whistle soft Comanche melodies that drifted like the wind over the plains. They didn't speak of love. They didn't need to. It was there, in every glance, every shared silence. The night of the storm. That night, the sky split open with thunder. Lightning turned the fields white, and wind howled like a wounded beast. Thomas was in the barn securing the animals when a fallen branch pinned his leg. The horses screamed. The barn roof began to creak under the storm. Abigail ran into the rain calling, "Pa, where are you?" Takano saw her from the porch and sprinted toward the sound. Inside the barn, the roof began to cave. He dove forward, lifted the heavy beam, and dragged Thomas free with a roar that tore through the storm. Abigail threw herself at her father, sobbing, "You're alive." Thomas looked at the Comanche, chest heaving, rain dripping from his hair. For the first time, he didn't see a savage. He saw a man who had risked his life for them. He whispered, "You've done more than I ever expected, Chief." Takano only nodded. "No one dies tonight." The aftermath. The next morning, the world was quiet again. The barn roof was broken, but the storm had left behind something else, understanding. Thomas came out to the porch where Takano was sharpening an old knife. He said gruffly, "You saved me. Can't say I understand you, but I owe you my life." Takano didn't look up. "You owe nothing. Your daughter already paid the debt when she saved me." Thomas hesitated. "You'll leave soon, won't you?" The Comanche paused, then nodded. "The moon is nearly full." Thomas nodded back, eyes heavy. Maybe you don't have to go right away." Takano looked at him, the old man who had once spat at his name, and smiled faintly. "Then perhaps I will wait for one more sunrise." The Dance of Hearts. That night, under a sky full of stars, the air felt soft and alive. Abigail came to the porch, barefoot, her dress fluttering like wheat in the wind. "Pa's asleep," she whispered. "He said you can stay another day." Takano smiled. "Then I will stay until dawn." They stood quietly for a while, watching the moon rise over the plains. "I never thanked you," she said softly, "for saving him." "You already did, when you smiled," he said. She looked at him, eyes bright. "When I first saw you, I thought you'd die." "I thought I would too," he admitted. "Then I saw you, and for the first time, I wanted to live." Her breath caught. "Takano," she whispered, his name trembling like a prayer. He stepped closer, his hand lifting to brush a strand of hair from her face. The world seemed to stop, the wind, the stars, even time itself. Their foreheads touched. No words, no promises. Just two hearts beating beneath the same sky. Once enemies, now something more sacred. The riders returned. The next morning brought dust on the horizon. 5 soldiers, riding fast. Thomas saw them first. His heart sank. They dismounted near the gate, rifles slung, faces hard. "We're looking for a Comanche," their leader barked. "One escaped from the canyon battle. Tall, scar across the shoulder. Heard he's been seen near here." Thomas hesitated. "You're mistaken. Ain't no one like that around." The captain sneered. "We'll take a look around anyway." Takano stepped out from the barn before Thomas could stop him. "I'm here," he said. Abigail gasped. "No, don't." The captain smirked. "Well, look at that. Saves us the trouble." He raised his pistol. Abigail threw herself in front of Takano. "No, he saved us. He's not your enemy." The soldier laughed. "Miss, that thing is your enemy." Thomas shouted. "He saved my life. You'll have to shoot me first." The captain hesitated, uncertain. The other soldiers shifted nervously. The storm of silence grew thick. Finally, Takano stepped forward. "Enough blood," he said quietly. "I will go." Abigail clutched his arm. "You can't. They'll kill you." He looked at her gently. "You gave me life once. That is enough for a man like me." He touched her cheek, the smallest, tenderest goodbye, and whispered, "The wind will carry my heart back to you." Then he turned and walked toward the riders. The price of peace. They bound his hands and led him away. Abigail fell to her knees, sobbing, as the dust swallowed them. Thomas stood behind her, fists clenched. "We can't let this happen." He saddled his horse, eyes blazing. "If he dies, I'll never forgive myself." Abigail wiped her tears. "Then I'm coming too." They rode through the night, following the soldiers' trail across the plain. By dawn, they found the camp, a fire, 5 horses, and Takano tied to a post. Before the sun fully rose, Thomas lifted his rifle and fired. One soldier fell. The rest scrambled. In the chaos, Abigail ran to Takano, cutting his bonds with a knife. He looked at her, stunned. "You should not be here." She smiled through tears. "You said the wind would carry your heart back. I just followed it." He laughed softly, the sound of a man reborn, and together they fled into the canyon. The return of the hawk. Days later, when the dust settled, no one in the valley saw the soldiers again. Thomas and Abigail returned home, exhausted but alive. On the hill above the canyon, they found a single feather tied to the old oak post, an eagle feather, shining in the sun. Thomas placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "He's alive," he said quietly. Abigail nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know." Years later, the world changed. Towns grew, rails cut through the plains, and the old wars faded into memory. Abigail took over the farm after her father's passing. She grew older, but never married. People whispered stories of the girl who saved the Comanche, of the love that never died. One summer evening, she sat by the porch, watching the horizon blaze gold. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of hooves. A lone rider approached, his hair streaked with gray, his face carved by time. But his eyes, those dark, eternal eyes, were the same. "Takano," she whispered. He dismounted, smiling softly. "I told you the wind would bring me back." She stood frozen for a heartbeat, then ran into his arms. The years between them fell away like dust in the wind. No words were needed. The plains themselves seemed to sigh. For two souls, who had once defied hate, now finding each other again. And as the sun set behind them, The Comanche chief and the farmer's daughter stood hand in hand, proof that even across blood and borders, love could still bloom beneath the endless western sky.